Hey everyone, this is your host, Andrew Holland. Thank you so much for listening to the Andrew Holland podcast each and every week, where we talk about business, entrepreneurship, and everything in between. As an entrepreneur who's been through a lot of highs and a lot of lows, I started this podcast to be a source of weekly motivation, inspiration, and support for all of us who are working to achieve something meaningful. And as importantly, so that none of us ever have to feel alone or isolated while we're doing so. Together, we explore the stories of successful people, we get insight and advice from individuals who have accomplished amazing things. We discuss practical and fascinating business models and strategies, and we dive deep into understanding ourselves as human beings. So please, help me grow our group and subscribe to the show on your favorite audio platform. Subscribe to, watch, and thumbs up our episodes on our YouTube channel, the Andrew Holland Podcast. Follow and interact with me on Twitter and Threads. My handle is A Holland Podcast. That's A Holland Podcast. That's probably my favorite part of the whole podcast is the interaction I get with our guests and with you as our listeners. Lastly, if you enjoy the show and you want to support what we're working to accomplish, please share our show with your friends, with your family, and your colleagues at work. This show is nothing without you and your support, and I'm so incredibly thankful for each and every one of you listening, watching, and sharing the podcast every single week. Now it's time to get our motivation, inspiration, and support for this week and jump into today's episode. In today's episode, we have part 2 of my conversation with Ghiz, who goes by Buzz, and we talk about his second company, Paramount Pool Spa Systems. Starting from, if you recall from part 1, he sold Paddock Pool, the construction and really fully integrated pool company, from building it all the way to having a retail store and being able to supply it. He sold that in 2005. And we start or pick up with how he ultimately, after that sale, feeling a little bit depressed and losing his purpose, jumped into growing Paramount Pool and Spa Systems with an incredibly successful exit, probably many multiples over compared to his 2005 exit with Paddock Pool. This exit was in 2018. Buzz shares that whole story with us, and throughout that conversation, we talk about so many important life concepts, listening to your people, the importance of having a purpose, the importance of mindset in anything you're trying to do, in any big goal you're trying to accomplish, and in your daily life, authenticity of an individual, being genuine and authentic no matter what you're doing, hiring and firing. And you get his answer to my question of whether entrepreneurs are born or are they made. Then we talk about some current topics, including the economy. We talk about where he thinks the next opportunities and value creation lie for any and all entrepreneurs. You really enjoy part 2 of my conversation with Buzz as much as you did part 1. I had a lot of fun, and I want to hear what you think about it once it's all done.
Andrew Holland is a CPA, a real estate broker, and involved in multiple businesses, including some investment companies. The Andrew Holland podcast is for informational purposes only. All of Andrew's views and those of his guests are solely their opinions and do not reflect the opinions of any of the businesses or companies Andrew or his guests are affiliated with. You should not treat any advice, conversation, business recommendation, investment recommendation, or anything of the like as a specific inducement to make a specific business decision, take a specific action, make a particular investment, or follow a specific business or investment strategy. Thank you so much for listening and enjoy the show.
That year after you sold Paddock and you were in depression, and anybody who sold a business had a successful exit, everybody thinks, oh boy, you just sold your company and you made all this money. You should be the happiest person on. Money doesn't make you happy. Purpose and doing something every day that you love. And all of a sudden, for people maybe who haven't sold a business before, that's gone. It's just gone. Like, think about how that would feel. You can have $1 billion in your bank account. Who cares? Like, what your life's purpose was. So you're sitting there in 2005. I'm going to say your purpose. Obviously, you have a family, but people get what I'm saying. Professionally speaking, is gone. What got you out of that rut after a year, after you kind of dealt with, okay, I didn't want to do this, but I understand why we did it. How did you kick yourself in the pants and take Paramount to the next level?
Well, I think I was at that transition. I was somewhat lucky because I went from Paddock to Paramount, and I again back in or late '90s, I bought out most of the stock. I had my sister and my brother stayed in with me, and I saw a diamond in the rough. So the transition when I left Paddock after 2 years because I couldn't work for them anymore, going to Paramount was I got out of the depression of selling Paddock because at that time says because doggone it, I wouldn't go. But then I saw the light and I saw the vision that we could do at Paramount. So I was really fortunate at that time that I had to go right to Paramount and put all my energy and passion and love into that company. So it was easy for me at that time. At that transition, it was easy.
Yeah. And just to remind our listeners, so Paramount was the manufacturer and distributor of pool parts and accessories. Did you guys have patents on a lot of these products?
Well, when we sold the company, we had 90 patents. We had
90, wow.
Yeah, and John Gettle, I mentioned him earlier, probably had his stamp on about 80% of those. He was a brilliant mind, I call him.
Brilliant engineer.
Brilliant engineer.
So you guys grow Paddock, and in 2018, what was 2008 and 2009 like for you guys at Paramount? I said you guys grew Paddock. I meant to say Paramount. What was that like for you guys?
It was tough because I was still into the recession, and obviously, just to give you an idea, when in 2005, the pool industry sold, I just think in the United States, by the way, it was 250,000 pools sold in the United States in 2005. It was booming at that. We all know it was booming at that time. In 2008, it went from about 225 or 250,000 pools down to about 40,000 pools. And Paramount's business is all reflected on new pool sales. We didn't have a lot of aftermarket products at that time. We didn't. We ended up shifting our business to a lot to aftermarket. So it's just navigating through those waters and getting people to believe in what you get, putting a good solid plan together and where you want to be and how you're going to get there. So it was a tough time then, but I knew eventually it was going to get better. And I would tell my team members, it's about market share. How do we get greater market share? There's going to be less pie, so how do we get more of that? And that's how we drove our business on getting better market share and building those relationships because we had dealers all over the world. We were in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Spain. I'm talking about Paramount now. Spain, France. We were all over. So we just worked hard on building very strong relationships, offering more than just plastics. That's something else I want to get into if we have time to do that. When you build a business, if you just stay laser focused on your product, not what's the peripheral stuff, like helping them build their business, their dealers build the business, which we did very successful at. So we built really strong relationships and got through it, built and worked on market share and got through it. And then in the booth, then I was told if we gain 4 or 5 points in market share, when things do pick up, guess what? It's going to be the fruits of your labor are going to be paid big time. So everyone is focused on that.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point that a lot of people, all of us, really don't think about. Obviously, nobody wants a depression or the great financial crisis, but there are always benefits to everything, right? And one of the things, if you can find a way, if you focus on your balance sheet and you have the cash to withstand the most turbulent times, and a lot of companies learned that from 2008, 2009. I'm a little bit worried about maybe we didn't learn what we need to when I look at the economy right now, and I want to talk about that from your perspective. But if you have the cash to survive and your competitors don't, when you make it through, like you said, the opportunity for you there is tremendous. And that happened for you guys.
And we were fortunate enough to have the cash because at that time I said, there's 2 things we can do. We can kind of fold tent and just kind of go along. So we beefed up our R&D and developed products during that time. Mm-hmm. And we also beefed up our marketing at that time to gain the market share. But we were fortunate to have, I ran a very, fiscally smart business and put money away for times like this. And so we beefed up our marketing, and we beefed up our R&D. And it all paid off down the road for us.
When you sold Paddock, was Paramount on its own breaking even at that point?
No, it was probably losing money.
It was losing money. Yeah. Okay. So then once you really put your focus, and again, the reason I asked earlier, how can you manage 2 companies? It's really challenging to successfully run 2 companies. And I'm saying it can't be done, but Paddock was obviously the big fish and where you were able to focus on the margins, and Paramount was still there. And then once that was gone, you could put your focus on Paramount, bring the income statement where it needed to be, break even, and then skyrocket from there. when you saw that growth with Paramount in 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, it was really a result of you investing in the business, in the marketing side and the patent side. Did you guys do a lot of patents in 2008 and 2009?
Oh yeah.
That's where
Well,
a lot
of patents. I mean, patents are tough.
Yeah,
Developing products aren't easy. But
Yeah.
when ones we did, we developed, and we were kind of had the mode that in most any idea that we would come up with, we would try to throw in at least a provisional patent.
Mhm.
And I learned that from reading a lot about Steve Jobs and what he did there is to protect yourself. At least get a provisional in there,
Yeah.
because if the idea and maybe 80-70% fell off, but 30% didn't fall off. So we put a lot of patents went on. But again, they're not easy. They're developing, creating products. I mean, it's much easier to acquire something and which I did, by the way, during a couple of products when we had Paramount, when we didn't want to put the money in patents, we went and acquired a product line.
Smart.
That proved out really profitable for us. But yeah.
You said you, in 1998, bought out the majority of the stockholders, but you were still in it with your brother and your sister. Which brother and sister?
David.
And
my sister, Angel.
Yeah. Okay.
And you know why they stayed in it?
Because they believed in you.
Oh, boy. Yeah, right on. Because I tried to buy them all out, to be honest with you. They said, no, we know you. We know you. And so I have to give them a whole lot of credit for that, to be honest with you. They were smart enough to go along with the ride.
Well, and just in talking with you, it's obvious why they did. So I don't think you give yourself enough credit. 2017 comes along, and Giselle passes away, and Edward passes away. Your two siblings.
Yeah.
For all of us, we've all had moments in our life where important people pass away. And it is an opportunity for us to take a step back and reflect on our lives and what we're prioritizing. That ultimately led to you selling Paramount in 2018, correct?
Yeah, I think that was the beginning of it, to talk about it, and then I think that was the big factor. But the other factor was my two sons. Did first thing. So I was fortunate enough to have the ability to have a legacy business with my dad. So I tell you, Andrew, I never took that for granted. There's probably 1 or 2% maybe in the world that get the opportunity that myself and my two brothers had, to have a legacy business. So it was important, especially in our heritage, is to be able to pass it on. So we had many family meetings and meditation and prayer and all sorts of things. And once they told me, after the thinking with my two siblings passing away in a very short period of time, when they decided they didn't want it as this kind of a legacy business, they wanted to kind of carve their own path, and they had some ideas what they wanted.
This is your sons telling you that?
I'm sorry, my sons. Yeah.
What are their names?
Nicholas and Anthony.
Nick and Anthony. Okay.
That they decided that no, Dad, this is just not for us, and we want to do our own thing, and and we obviously want your help to do it. And so once kind of the siblings and they decided that they didn't want it as a legacy business, then it became maybe a little easier for my wife and I.
You kind of got peace with the fact that, you know what, I had the chance for a legacy business, but my sons want to make their own way, and I'm good with that now.
Yeah. And it wasn't just one time.
Of course.
Many times we'd have this conversation, and, making sure. And then again, the passing of my two siblings. So that kind of was the impetus behind it. Then I got approached at a trade show, and that's kind of when things started. Yeah.
So you sell Paramount in 2018. I imagine, just given the nature of the industry and the multiples in that industry, it was an even better sale than Paddock. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah.
Lots of people have said, what would you go in if you're going to I said, there's really two only industries I'm really interested in: manufacturing and e-commerce. You're in manufacturing, and there's obvious reasons. The opportunity for distributions and the multiples on sales, if that's your ultimate goal, are incredible. You sell it in 2018. Did you stay on with Hayward Industries? Bought you, correct?
Yeah.
Did you stay on for a while with them?
I did. I had a contract with them for 2 years, so I stayed on just a little bit more than 2 years. But I want to just digress, because you said something earlier about money. It was, to me, all my career, it was never about money, ever. I think when entrepreneurs make it about money and not about the journey and about the passion of the product or the service or whatever they're offering, it usually doesn't pan out. So even this last sale, it was never about the money. it was about so much greater things. But I stayed on with them. We sold in August of 18, and I stayed on to them till 18. I did I think September or October of 20.
I'm glad that you made that point. I ask a lot of my guests, does money make you happy? And for some reason in our society, and I think because of all the glamour and everybody thinks, oh, if I had this much money, I'm going to be so happy. And anybody that's actually had it, those are probably the least happy points for me in my life. And there's ups and downs. You have money and then you don't, and then you do, and then you don't, depending on where you are in your entrepreneurial journey. So I'll ask you that question. You've answered it, but I want you to talk a little bit more about it. Does money make you happy?
No. I mean, I don't want to take it lightly. I'm obviously having money, earning the money, I guess is a better way to put it. Earning the money and not be given the money. It makes life easier for sure. Does it make it happier? No. It's really about your family and your surrounding and your friends and the meaningful and having a purpose and an identity and is much, much more important. I mean, money comes and goes, but there's so many other things in your life that are much more important to you than that. Again, I don't want to take it lightly because there's a lot of people out struggle and I don't, but because it makes it easier, but it surely doesn't make you happier. No.
Yeah, and
you might think it does, but it doesn't.
No, and that's the thing. Obviously, you can buy time, freedom with your family, but up to a certain point. And there's been so many studies. Up to this point, money makes you happier. Past that, it actually there's like it's a negative correlation. The more you get, more money, more problems. Yeah. So. And of course, that's not always true. And I think you also made a really, really good delineation that I think it's a really important distinction that people don't recognize. And it goes back to purpose. When you earn your money, the amount of appreciation you have for it and the recognition of what's important in life and those priorities, I think comes on that journey of earning the money, as opposed to we see a lot of scenarios where someone's just given the money and they can do a lot of good with it. But I think you have to be really cautious. And I've seen this from my hometown. We go back to the second or third generation, worked with one of the sons and a huge supermarket. They were doing really successful. And second and third generations came in and just destroyed it. We're going to grow it so fast, or basically just given to them. And you don't really appreciate the value of that hard work. And so you just kind of make willy-nilly decisions. But, and there's nothing wrong with being given a lot of money. I would just say that for those who are in that situation, be mindful of some of the, be mindful of some of the cautions that you should be aware of, because it's easier when you haven't necessarily put in the blood, sweat, and tears to not care for it as well, if you know what I'm saying.
Sure.
So I'm glad that you made that distinction. You retire. You sell your company. You've had 2 successful exits. You've been through a lot of ups and downs. Talk to us about your frame of reference or your mind positioning at that point.
Yeah.
Going into retirement, and now, as you said, you hopped and jumped into work every single day. And I imagine with Paramount, it was the same thing.
Same thing.
And now that's gone. And now you don't have another company that you can focus all your energies. Talk to us.
Retirement, and I'll speak for me because everyone is different with it. But for me, it's been really difficult because I had such a love for what I did, and I've been working my whole life. And again, not for money, just for the purpose of it. And then all of a sudden, you wake up the next morning that when you're done, you walk out the building, and the next morning it's like, okay, what now? What? My identity is somewhat gone. The purpose. Family aside, I don't ever want to take that lightly, because first and foremost in my family is my family. Professionally speaking, I want to make sure that the distinction is there on that. But it was a difficult time for me to find that, because now he was that, and he was this, and I'm not. It wasn't, and I just think that when you retire, you better, and I didn't probably think through it enough to really have a plan put into place. In some people can do it, but I don't fish and I don't hunt and I don't golf. And when you don't do any of that and your hobbies are been your family or your hobbies been your work, it becomes very difficult and challenging because I still have a lot to give, I think. So it was tough. It is tough, but I'm giving back doing podcasts like this, and I really appreciate this, by the way. Andrew, I want you to know that I hope
Thank you.
that there's something that someone can listen to and get out of, and just even if it's just one nugget, then we win at that point. If there's more than that, that's even greater. But I think you have to be prepared for it. You know, I don't know all the 4 stages, but I was reading, it's been a while, there's 4 stages of retirement, and I think now finally I'm in number 4, feeling better about it. And now I'm giving back. I'm doing some consulting. I'm doing some speaking across the country on culture and branding and just my journey and being able to pass it on. I've always been really big on giving back to young entrepreneurs, giving back my lessons that the good, the bad, and the ugly, be honest with you, so they can help them to be better at what they do. But I attribute a lot of my feelings and strength from my wife after 44 years. If you don't have that good partner, they say, for every good man, there's a better woman. Well, I got the better woman. So she's been really supportive of this whole situation. She came from a family of entrepreneurs too. So it made it probably easier to understand my journey than working all the hours I worked through it as well. But it's a different journey.
Yeah. Buzz, first off, I want to say thank you for those kind words, because what you just described and taking the time, and that's why I started this podcast, because I remember in year 2 or 3 of the garbage business that I had with a business partner, you have tons of people around you. And mind you, I was really young, immature, and inexperienced, 23 or 24, but you have all these people around you. It's financially, it's very tough. And you just feel alone. The entrepreneurial journey is a real struggle, and there's a lot of highs and there's a lot of lows. And I don't think anybody ever has to feel that way. And so by having conversations with people like you who have been through it and can share those life lessons, again, you've provided far more than one nugget of advice that we can all take away from this. And there's a lot more questions I want to ask you. We all have different experiences, but we can learn from each other. And if I had a failure and I share it with you, and I love how you said the good, the bad, and the ugly, because so many times we hear the success stories and all, but that's not the real character of, first off, a human, but the entrepreneurial story. It's about the failures and how did you get through those, and what were good failures and what were bad failures, meaning, you should have seen it coming, or if you didn't see it coming, how could you prepare if it came for the next time? And you've talked about that in 2008, 2009. But I want to talk about those highs and lows for you. You've obviously shared with us some of the really dark moments or hard, challenging moments. Obviously, there's been some great moments, both personally and professionally. But the human psyche isn't really designed, I don't believe, for such high highs and low lows in such a short period of time. I mean, you can be having a week and you just win a huge contract. And again, we're talking professionally. There's a lot of amazing things that happen on the personal side. A huge contract, and then the next week you're coming through and someone's suing you. How have you found, or what have you found that works for you that may work for others to deal with that type of volatility, emotionally speaking?
Wow, that's a big question. How I dealt with it was just dealing with it head on. There's highs and lows, and from being sued to losing a big contract or whatever it happens to be. But there's always the next day. There's always the next deal. There's always the next thing. And I think a good leader has to show that, because it's very visible to people that if you don't. But I just dealt with it each thing kind of one-on-one, and dealt with it and got through it, and never had a huge problem with that, to be honest with you, Andrew. I don't know how to answer it other than that. I just dealt with it, and always had an optimistic and positive attitude. Matter of fact, I don't even like being around negative people, because it saps me, because people say I've got all this energy, and I don't like, so I would just deal with it. And if it had to bring in team members to deal with it head on, how are we going to deal with this? How are we going to handle it? And that's just what we did. I just would not let anything get me down. I've always been a real positive person.
I think that's a fantastic answer because you brought up two really important things. That again, that seems simple, but sometimes, looking at someone else's situation, it's easy to see it. But if it's your own situation, it can be challenging. Dealing with things head on. So many people, conflict happens, and especially in this day and age. And I don't know if it's these phones or what. They just try to. Here's the conflict. It's right in the center. They'll just try to that conflict's only going to grow and basically occupy your whole brain space if you just don't deal with it head on. I think that's fantastic advice because then that volatility goes from a magnitude of 20 to 80 if you just ignore it. And number two, positivity and the mind. What God has given us in our mind is an incredibly powerful thing. And you can either use it for you or you can use it against you. And even for me, I think all humans struggle with this just because by our very sinful nature, there are days when you wake up and you just feel less positive or negative. But if you can just, no matter what you're facing, if you can just turn or hit that little button to say, you know what? This is the day the Lord has made. Let us be glad and rejoice and take a positive outcome, no matter what has happened. It is incredible the difference in outcomes that you get with the exact same situation, just with a different mentality.
And it's a choice, by the way, right?
It is.
It's a choice.
It's 100% a choice.
And that's why I always get up in the morning and, some of you might have had a bad day or even a situation in your family, whatnot, but it's you get up and say, I got two choices. How do I do it? Negatively or positively? And a good leader, I'll be honest with you, and my dad taught me really, he always had a funny thing to say, when you walk in the building, this is funny. Walk on your toes because that'll give you that extra. It's weird. Walk on your toes, but I do it today because it sets it off and people can read it. So good leaders, you better be positive. Now you want to shut your door and deal with it. Deal with it. But I always say it's a choice, and I was just fortunate enough and blessed enough to know that I always would turn on the positive switch.
And it's funny you say that, walking on your toes is one for me. I've read tons of smile.
Yeah.
When I'm really in a batter, I just try to force myself to smile. I don't know what happens back there, but it works. Now, I think it's important to note, we've all seen these people who are fake. Okay, we're not talking about, there's a difference between being positive but still being authentic and being fake positive. I can read through that. You can read through that. Almost every human can read through that. So for all of you out there who may be saying, okay, so I got to fake it. No, just be authentic, and everybody has ups and downs, but be positive. Yeah. And that's different than being fake. Yeah. I think the other really important thing you said is one bad egg can destroy a whole culture. I have seen that in teams. You have seen it in teams, which is why it's so important for a leader or the managing team to have good culture and good positive attitude. But I'll tell you what, I love that you said you try to stay away from negativity because we all become the 5 people that we hang most around, right? Negativity is more infectious than any other disease.
It'll sap you.
How do you think, and what, based on your experience, you've dealt with this before? How do you confront that and figure it out? You can't just go through firing people because that destroys the culture. When you've seen that situation arise, and every single company has this situation, that 1 or 2 people, maybe it's a department, wherever it is that little negativity that you can kind of see or has the potential to filter through departments, organizations, the company, and impact the culture. What have you done historically that you found successful to deal with that?
Yeah, and the other challenging part is, let's say you have that person is that a little bit that's negative, but it's an A player at what they do. That even becomes a lot more challenging.
They're awesome at what they do, but they're
exactly.
Yeah,
that, I mean, if it's using Steve Jobs, if it's a B or C player, well, it's pretty easy to eliminate it and you do it. But if you got an A player that's really, really good, but yet that. So I think a lot of it has to do with just the leader, the team leader, the manager at that point.
You've had that situation where you've had an A player negative.
Oh, yeah.
What did you do?
Well, I would say twice we ended up letting the A player go, and it hurts. But you know what? They can do more damage. More damage is cancerous, basically, and it spreads. So, yeah, they're really, really good at what they do, but yet they're destroying the culture of your business. It probably does more damage, long-term damage. So, there have been a couple times where we just couldn't make it work, and you really do. You try to give people the benefit of the doubt because we always don't know what goes on behind closed doors. Maybe there's something there in their life, child sick, death of a child, a spouse. So you try to figure out, pull that out and try to get it out, let them know how important they are to the business. And, but, but if the buts don't get, then you eventually have. And that, I think that's been, if I were to say a weak spot for me, I'm loyal to a fault. Sometimes I used to take too long to make that decision because I'm really loyal. Not so much because that he or she was an A player, because I'm just loyal and I want to make it work. But I learned probably too late in life that normally if you can try, but if it's not there, it's not there. Cut it loose and let it go. So that's how we dealt with it. And there were times we turned it around. We kind of figured, well, maybe there was something behind the scenes, and be more empathetic to what was going on in that person's life and understanding. And that's the other thing, is being empathetic to you. Good leader's very empathetic. And if you're not an empathetic leader, then you're not much of a leader.
Yeah. And that starts with listening. And you and I are in the same boat, and I learned it the hard way. I knew in my gut that it wasn't going to work, and you try and you keep trying to convince yourself, and it doesn't work. So I just caution other people who are in that scenario. If your gut's telling you one thing and you tried the empathetic, and if sometimes there are real reasons, something going on behind the scenes, just as humans, forget about being in a company. You want to look out or help someone if they're in a, but sometimes it's just not a good character fit. Just who they are culturally, personally, it doesn't fit. Yeah. So you grew up in a very entrepreneurial family. And I'm a big believer that there are 4 types of people. There are people who are born to be entrepreneurs, and they discover they're entrepreneurs and they become entrepreneurs. There are people who aren't born to be entrepreneurs, and they know they're not entrepreneurs, and they work for someone else, and it's fantastic. The world needs all of that. Sure. There are people who are not born to be entrepreneurs, and they try it and realize, you know what, that wasn't for me. And then this last category is the one I want to talk about the most, because I think it's the saddest. People that are born to be entrepreneurs, but they never bet on themselves and discover that, yes, you can be a really successful entrepreneur. I think the premise of what I just said is, do you believe entrepreneurs are born, or are they made?
I think it's a mixture, to be honest with you. I think there's some that are just born for that. I mean, again, at a young age, what was I doing at 10 years old doing stuff? You just
it's in your genes. Yep.
It's in the genes.
Yep.
Well, yeah, that's right. It's in the DNA. But I also think they could be made, because they can see other entrepreneurs and they can see other people successful at what they do, and they have the drive to do it. So I think they could be made if they see it. But most entrepreneurs give up. I guess that's the problem, or don't have maybe the wherewithal, in fairness to them at that point, the wherewithal all to take it. But I think they could be made. I do, if they have the guts and the drive and the passion and the love for what they do, and not give up on. But there also, Andrew, there is a point that you do have to give up on at times. If and maybe you move it to another direction by the give up on that particular thing, because there are times, saying no sometimes it's easy to say yes all the time. So there's times when you get to a point to say, this isn't going anywhere. I got to give up on this dream. What's my next dream to move on to? And I think too many people hang on to that and wait too long, to be honest with you, because you do want to fight to the end. Don't misunderstand me. I can give you stories of myself doing that, but there are times you got to say, no, this is not right.
It's scary, Buzz. You read my mind, because that's exactly where I was going to go. You talked about your dad was packing your own chemicals, and you quickly shut that down when you became president. And then you talked about don't give up. You didn't give up on Paramount in 2008, 2009. You didn't give up on Paddock in 1990, 1991. How do you know when to give up on something and when not to?
Oh, that's the $1 million question. Yeah, I
based on your experience, what have you learned about maybe some advice when someone's struggling?
When you get to the end of the road on something, and you've fought, hours, days, years to it, and you just see no path to success of the end result of what you want to get out of it, I think that's when you say no, or find another path, or that path is not the way, that runway is not the right runway. Let's go to another runway. But I think it finally gets to a point to where you just there's no path to success.
You said you've had one of those, and maybe you should have given up sooner. What was that?
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask me the question. I think it was on a product line. Okay, I'll tell you. It was at Paramount, and it was on a particular product line that I was in love with.
What year is this?
It would have been in 2013 or 14.
Okay.
And I fell in love with it. I'm not going to talk about the product line, but there was a product line that I was in love with, but no one else was.
Can you give us the nature of it?
It was in the sanitation business.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was in love with it, and none of the engineers were. And I kept driving them to it because that was my nature. Drive, no, don't come back to me. I want to see this. And finally, because I was in love with it, but they knew better than I knew, but I didn't care. Because I hated losing. That's just part of my nature. So I think that at that time when it finally got to that pinnacle, I guess, to where they finally came in and pretty much said, listen, we're done. If not, I'm leaving. I can't, I just can't even do this. It's not going to work. And here's the reasons why. So it was one of those product lines that I finally gave up on. Now, though, I will tell you, we took all of the things that we were going to do on that product line and turned it into something else, though, in the same category, and was successful at it.
What was the difference between those two? What made one successful and the other not?
Well, listening to the engineers on what to do and why to move into this direction and why that's where to go. Once we understand where the market was going. So yeah, it was the engineers. I call them engineers. There's a difference between an engineer and a creator, to be honest with you. John Gettle he was blessed with both. He was both an engineer and a creator. He could sit on a napkin and draw something out of it. Now that's a creator.
That's a genetic gift.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it was just, I guess that was one of the things I gave up on, which I didn't want to, but I did.
What should have been your clue? And we've all had those. I've had those, and you eventually just face her. What should have been your clue on that particular one that, you know what, I'm in love with it, but this isn't the right thing, and I need to fold in the towel right now? When you look back, obviously hindsight's 2020.
I should have listened to them, the smarter people smarter than I, much sooner.
Okay,
because
so
they knew they knew all the good reasons,
yeah.
And I was hearing, but I wasn't listening. I could hear, but I wasn't listening because I believed in it and I was in love.
How did you know with the packing chemicals that you should have given up on that?
Just the pure safety of it. I mean, what had to get done. I mean, you had to be in full body suits and masks on, and I'm saying to myself, and I didn't shut it down until he passed away, by the way, because he was in love with it. But that was one of those things, right?
Yeah.
But I knew it was a very, very unhealthy, safe environment for people because I did it. And I said, I vowed to myself when I was doing it, I will shut this down. And it was the next day we shut it down. So I knew then it was the wrong thing to do because it was for the people, the environment that was in.
You said something that was really important, and I think, I'm still learning. I said I'd never start another business after I sold my first business, and I've started like 4, which I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with focus. And I'm, at the age of 36 going on 37, I'm finally starting to learn focus. And there is opportunity everywhere. And you can either start something from scratch, or you can buy something. They kind of put the widget together, but it just needs to be taken to the next level. You said a little bit earlier in Paramount, some you developed in-house from the bottom up, and others you went out and you bought. How did you know when to do which?
Because, one of them was a sanitizer, was a UV system that we looked at doing it in-house and how long it was going to take us to do it, to develop our own. So we wanted to get to market sooner because we knew that category was a very big category. So we went out and I said, well, let's go down the path of creating, but let's go down the path of what's out there that we can acquire to get to market sooner. But the important thing was what you said, is getting it and then putting our own touch on it because it needed to be developed. But I think just getting to market quicker, and it's a much quicker, faster way to go because developing things can literally take years to develop product. I mean, there's a few products we had, from our in-floor systems to our lighting systems to everything we had, would take years to develop to get to a point where you buy something, you improve it and get to market, you see the revenue a lot quicker.
Yeah. Do you believe, we've talked about existing generations, we've talked about customer service, we've talked about work ethic, we've briefly touched on technology and how it's changing society. Do you believe that it is harder today to start a business and be successful than it was 20, 30, 40 years ago?
I don't think so. I just think the opportunities are in front of us all the time. You got to find out what that opportunity is. You find out always kind of look at what does the market need, I guess, whatever category you're in, by the
Mhm.
way. It doesn't really matter. It just could be anything. No, I don't think so. I mean, every day you see something new. From AI just came out, and where did that come from? And what's going to be the next Facebook or the next Apple? No, I don't. I think if you really study the market and find something that you love and find something maybe that the market needs, it's not there, then no, I don't. I think it's just as easy today as long as you have the wherewithal to do it. No, I think you can do it.
We've talked a lot about people and the importance of good people in an organization. What would you say to someone who says, well, yeah, that's all fine and dandy, Buzz, but I can't afford an A player right now. I can hardly even afford to make the small payroll that I have. I'm still growing my company. I don't have all this money to just be blowing on stuff. So maybe you could afford someone, but I can't. So what do I do?
You can afford not to. How's that? You can afford not to have good people. They make your business. So my only answer is I don't buy that. Figure out a way to get it done. Get the right people, surround yourself by the right people, because they will help you drive the business. They will help you grow your business, and B players won't do that to you, and C players won't do that to you. So surround yourself. You can't afford not to make the right decision with the right people.
You said you knew at a very early age that you wanted to be in the pool industry, and obviously you grew up with it in your family and in your household. If someone came to you and said, Buzz, I don't know what I want to do. Let's say it's someone that's 23 or 24. That's the question. What do I start? When you look into everything you've learned, everything you've experienced since you were born in 1953, and obviously you've got the benefit of a lot of the experience that your dad taught you. So even further back, going through World War II, so much has changed since then. Just everything. Consumers' purchasing habits, the standard GDP, everything has changed. Based on what you know about all the things you've done, and obviously being out of the pool industry, you're a well-educated individual, you're well-read. If you were to give someone advice, and again, I put advice in quotes because everybody has a different perspective on this, where do you think the biggest opportunities lie for a Buzz at 30 in this day and age? Let's say you were 30 right now. Where do you see some of the biggest opportunities?
Well, if I was in my 30s and 20s, I think the technology side is where I would be focusing in on. I think this AI thing, this AI technology is going to literally change the world. I think the software business, as a matter of fact, I'm doing something right now in the software side of it, something where it would be subscription business, which is click, 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 click. I think that's where I would start. If you have that ability, or you have enough someone surrounding you that has it, that's where I would probably, if I was 30, that's where I'd be focusing. And knowing what I know today, technology.
So I've thought a lot about that. What if you're not a tech genius, or you're not a John Gadel, or you can't code and do all these other things?
And go find someone that can and team up with them.
Excellent advice. That takes a lot of money,
Maybe.
Potentially, but you can raise money, investors, lenders.
Or startup. You're two guys together that are two gals together, whatever it is, and you're all going to work for nothing for a while. Sometimes you work for freaking nothing to get what you want. So again, you asked me, that's probably where I would try to go out, because I'm not that, but I would have taught myself maybe back in the day more about it and understood more about it. Because I think Bill Gates said something once. He says, "Be nice to geeks, you'll be working for them someday." Right? I remember in high school, all the geeks were now
look where they are.
Now look where they are. God love them. So I would say that's where I would go, and I would try to find someone that has the same drive and ability, that has that ability, that wants to start with nothing and maybe work for 2 years or 3 years for nothing at all and believe in something. That's kind of where I would go.
That's great advice. And I think the opportunity in AI technology, I think there's so many incredible opportunities in so many industries, but that one, that's where it's all going, right? Being in business with family. We haven't touched on that a lot. I'm in business with family, been in business with family, but I've also had non-familial business partners. Let's just talk about business partners. I've had lots of guests who say never do it. Lots of guests who say it's a fantastic thing. We won't be successful without it. What is your advice and your experience on having business partners? And then what are the top 3 things you've learned about being in business with family, which adds a whole layer of complexity that a lot of people don't even aren't even aware of until you've actually done it.
There's no doubt there's challenges with family, but I looking back at Paddock, I wouldn't have done it without him, though, to be honest with you. I absolutely wouldn't have done it, because they had the same drive and love and passion that I had. Again, I think my dad set it up correctly by putting me at president, and we didn't have, even though we'd arm wrestle a lot of things, they understood that if it was no, was no, was yes, yes. But I just think this is a lot of communication. You can't let, if you get out of a meeting and you're yelling and screaming at each other, which happens in families, you better get a way to work it out and not harbor anything. Just like marriage or anything else is about communication.
Mm-hmm.
So I have because maybe it's part of our heritage, I have a good feeling about family in business, but it's about communication and talking and not letting things harbor and build up and get it out on the table. And normally when that happens, who better did I trust than my brother David and Edward to do what they're doing? No one, no.
That trust. I think
trust.
You've encapsulated the most important foundation for any business relationship, really marriage, anything, any good relationship. Trust. If that trust isn't there.
Yeah. And we had it. We had it, and we had our battles. There's no question about it. Now we had more issues with the siblings that were not in the business but had, were a shareholder. That becomes a whole nother kettle. There's nothing that I can give advice on. That is to buy them out as fast as you possibly can, because in fairness to them, they think they're entitled to something, and they're really not. They're not contributing, but they think they are. So that too, my brother Edward and David and I was more of a challenge.
Yeah, I can imagine.
The three siblings that had stock but weren't participating in the business.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. What's your biggest failure, professionally speaking?
My biggest failure was, I think, in a pool company that I bought, another brand name out there, that I thought that we could start another pool company in Arizona, different name, two different names. And I thought, 1 and 1 would equal 4. And it didn't, and it completely failed. People associated us, the other pool company, with Paddock, and 1 and 1 didn't even equal 2. We didn't even do as many pools as we did with just Paddock. So I think my biggest failure looking back was thinking that I could grow market share by adding buying another pool company, name pretty big name at that time, bringing it in, running it separately, and it didn't work at all.
Are there signs, and I ask about that because I've learned the most from my failures, and I think everybody does. And there are people
out of failures comes success.
Exactly. And people are deathly afraid of becoming an entrepreneur because of fear of failure. Quite frankly, I think most people are afraid of living life because of fear of failure. Whether it's moving or doing this or being honest about this, it's just, and you really don't want fear to drive your life. But we're all human, so we all have different strengths and weaknesses. Was there something in that you could have known or seen before doing it? Because some things you just have to try, and then you're going to find, and it fails, and then sometimes you have to fail. There's no way to know whether it would work or not.
Yeah, I know. I'm looking back. I just, I'm a risk taker. So that's part of what entrepreneurship is. And we really thought and we thought as a team that we could grow our business and capture another 10 or 12% of the market share. And we had to do it. We had to try it.
How old are Nick and Anthony?
Nick is 35 and Anthony is 28, and my daughter is 38.
Okay, so they're all within a 10-year range. Mm-hmm. When you sit down with them, and I was going to ask if you were talking to your 30-year-old Buzz, but you can talk to your children. They're that age. Other than, we briefly talked about what industry you might go into. What are probably the top 2 or 3 pieces of advice, and maybe we've covered them, but that you wish you would have known at that age based on everything you've gone through?
Wow. I don't know.
And the reason I ask that is, one of the failures, I think being an entrepreneur and going through that journey changes who you are as a person. And, coming out of college, just for me, I was cocky, arrogant, didn't realize the value of other human beings, talked before I listened. Some would argue I still do that. But as I get older, I'm starting to realize just the vast amount of wisdom and opportunity that people in my generation and the generations below me can learn by just shutting our mouths and listening from people like you who have been through the thick, the thin, everything, across wars, across different economies, across different presidents, across different foreign policy settings, across so many different variables. And that's what business is. There's all different variables, right? And you got to make sense of all of them to run a successful business, people, culture, etc. And so that's why I asked that. If you're talking to Nick, or you're talking to Anthony, or you're talking to your daughter, or you're talking to me, put yourself at your age at 30. You know what, Buzz? Here's what I'm going to tell you that you don't know now, but if you can listen to what I'm saying and not just hear it, but listen and internalize what I'm saying, boy, you'll prevent yourself a whole world of hurt.
Yeah, I think you sparked something. I guess the biggest thing is to listen to your gut, number one, more, and your own instincts more. And also, you're right, surround yourself by people that are smarter than you in areas that you're not. Because when we're all young, I'm the same way. I was arrogant and thought I knew everything. Well, guess what? You don't know everything, especially when it's out of your wheelhouse. So I would say, listen to your gut, in your instincts, and know where your skill set is not, and go to people that have that skill set to help you get to where you got, and then of course surround yourself by good people. Yeah.
I think you hit on something that I'm still trying to learn, and it takes time to figure these things out, right? What you're good at and what you're not. But once you figure it out, number one, be honest with yourself.
Absolutely.
It's hard to look yourself in the mirror and say, Andrew, you suck at this, this, and this. Well, the reality is I do suck at this, this, and this. So I should just accept it. I could continue lying or pretending, but I do. So find someone else who's really awesome, but you're really good at this and this. So that's where you should focus on. And I think you hit that on the head, and it's really, I think that's a life learning lesson. I think even at your age, it's hard to say, I'm not good at this, but you get more comfortable just saying, you know what, I'm just not good at this.
No, I do it all the time. When my son's in some of the business ventures to get into, I said, listen, you came to me with advice. I'm not. Let's go find someone that's gone through down that road with that experience better. I'm smart enough to listen to them and be able to feather it out. Trust me. And so will you someday. But go to people that have gone down that road and are more experienced than you are. Because we do, listen, I'll be frank with you, I was not a good operator. I hired the guy, Lou Prioresci, who was my operated the business, more of an operations guy.
You were the strategy guy, he was the ops guy.
I don't ask me to I'm not good at it. I'm a visionary. I like to look at the horizon, and I like to sell, and I like to, so know that. And I learned that early on, back probably when I was in my mid 30s, because I thought, you think you know, but you don't, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Surround yourself with people that are a whole lot smarter than you, and don't be afraid not to be the smartest guy in the room. Everyone thinks they got to be in the room and think they're the smartest cat in the room. Guess what? You're not always the smartest guy in the room.
Quite frankly, you want to be the dumbest guy.
Yeah,
because that means you're surrounded by people that are smarter than you, and you could just sit there and absorb. When you look at the economy now, shifting gears, what do you see from we're at $33 trillion in debt as an economy. Other countries are in challenging struggles. And I ask this because you've been through the ups, you've been through the downs, you've been through 89, 90, 91, you've been through 2008, 2009, 2010. Some are predicting doom and gloom. Some are saying we're going to have a soft landing. Some are saying we're going to be hitting new highs. What's your perspective on that? Where, as we sit today in December of 2023?
Well, there again, I just got to lean on people a lot smarter than I, the economists. This economy has me so confused, and my head spins, because in all essence, when you think about, high inflation, right, usually relates to high unemployment, but we have high inflation, lowering now, mind you, but when it was high, we have 3.4. So people are working, right? Normally that doesn't happen like that. People are spending money like it's there's no tomorrow.
I can't figure it out.
I don't know. So they say I know they're getting into debt more. You hear the credit card debt is up, but yet they're spending money. The travel, the restaurant. You go into restaurants today, and expensive ones, by the way, that are. So you're asking. I don't know. I don't think we're going to be in a recession. I don't even think it's going to be a mild one. I think it's just going to be flat. But Andrew, I'm as an old timer, I'm going, what's going on here? People spending money like it's water, and yet, but they're working, and their mindset is they went through COVID and were locked up and said, I'm going to live life now. I'm going to live life, and I'm going to spend money. So all I see is, to be honest with you, and maybe I look through a different lens. If I'm young, I see opportunity. I do. I always look for opportunities, and I think there's opportunities in every economy. So that's my answer. I'm baffled.
I think that, it's funny you say that. People ask me, I said, nothing makes sense to me
Nothing
anymore.
makes-
I'm a CPA by trade, not the business economics one was my major, not that school really does anything but give you a foundation. You learn all of it through business and experience and working with people. I'm so confused, Buzz. It just doesn't make any sense. Like credit card debt's as highest it's ever been, or the last 40 years, and people are still spending. I see the same thing. And that gets to my next question for you. I got a lot of nieces and nephews, and very involved with them. And I see all of these generations who are addicted to their technology. They're addicted to phones. And, people are going to start calling me an old man. Oh, you're always ranting on technology. And I'm not. I think there's a lot of great things about technology. But I'm really beginning to question, and I want your perspective on this, whether the benefits and advantages of technology, and let's just focus to the phone, are really starting to be outweighed by the costs, the mental health costs, the attention span costs, the work ethic costs. When you can scroll through TikTok or YouTube Shorts or Instagram, and in 5 seconds you don't like something, you just keep feeding that brain. And I know there's lots of documentaries, but from a business or an entrepreneurial perspective, how do you view that? What do you see? Obviously, you have kids of your own. They're late 30s to older 20s, more in my generation. So I think in high school, maybe 11th grade, I had a flip phone or something. Yeah. But these generations before us, their whole life is based on technology. And you see it when you go through a drive-through. They don't look you in the eyes. They can't say, Buzz, how are you doing today? First off, they won't even look at you in the eyes. You're an imposition. And again, I'm not trying to castigate. I'm generalizing. So there's still a lot of great people out there. And I think for those who have that customer centric focus in those generations have lots of opportunity. What perspective do you have from your experience? And are we just going through the same, every generation always says the next generation is blah, 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 and they turn out fine?
Well, I think that's for sure. That's what goes back to, generation after generation about that. And I think obviously that with the phone technology, I think it's here to stay. It's not going to go anywhere. And in fact, it's going to continue to ramp up to all sorts of things. I think it really gets down to, and it worries me, to be honest with you, with the same thing. It worries me what goes on with this younger generation. And really, it's, we always blame it's all generations today.
Quite frankly, it is. It's permeating every generation.
It's permeating.
Yeah.
So it's just not.
When I text someone and they don't text me back for like 10 minutes, I'm like, what the heck is going on?
Yeah.
What 10 minutes? That's so.
Yeah. Everyone says, the millennials. Well, it's just, I think everyone is so addicted to it. Have you ever left your phone at home and then got to work and said, and you're like, your heart's palpitating,
Terrible.
So I think it's technology. It's here. It's again, AI is coming down the road, which is really, I think, a lot of great things with AI. And I think there's a lot of scary things with AI, but I think we just have to embrace it. And I think it really starts in the house, to be honest. The upbringing, you talk about, silly little things. I remember, like my dad said, well, when you shake someone's hand, shake that hand, make them, or look them in the eye when you talk to them. And I instilled that in all my children early on, even though I'm sure they're phones, whatnot. But I think it just starts at the house and how you bring them up. And not always does it work out that way.
Yeah.
But I think it's got to start there, because you're not going to get it. It's here to stay, and it's only going to grow. The technology is only going to go more and more and more. And there's a lot of great benefits to it as well. So I'm obviously concerned about it, but it is what it is at this point.
Yeah, and you certainly can't. You can either get on the train or you can get run over by the train. There's no question. From your experience being in a very, having gotten a tremendous amount of success based on culture and customer service experience, in person to person, I think culture can be really challenging to dictate over a phone or over technology. And of course, you don't get the interpersonal connections, but it's here to stay. How would you, just briefly, and maybe you haven't given this any thought, but I'd be surprised if you don't have some great advice on it, integrate technology, and maybe you guys started to do this with Paramount, into still creating an incredible customer service experience that is maybe a mix between interpersonal communication, but also utilizing the technology to gain the efficiencies from it?
Well, let me say this, and I'll get to that, because I think this next generation, the millennial generation, your business is gonna be done right here, and you better adapt your business to the phone. I mean, from everything. And as a matter of fact, we're working on some software now that's gonna do. So that we're never. So you better figure out a way to market yourself and market yourself to this next buying group, because they are going to be the next biggest buying group if not now, they're a very short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
But backing that up, if I had my business today, I would not be in favor of working from home. I will be on. I'm going to tell you, I just would not do it. You can't build a culture. More importantly, you can't build a community within your business having people sit at home. And I'm not saying they're not working from home. That's not where I'm coming. Maybe they're very productive. Maybe they're not. I'm not sure. But how does a leader, how do you build that community and culture with someone that never comes in the office, or comes in the office 1 or 2 days a week? To me, it's impossible. First of all, you lose the camaraderie, you lose the community, you lose ideas, you lose the meetings, you lose that energy within a building. So I would not be for that. And I know I'm probably going to get a lot of backlash from that, but I wouldn't. But again, back to the phone. You in this technology, you better be looking at the horizon on whatever you're doing in your business. Is it adaptable to what's the next buying group's going to be, which is the millennials, not Gen Z as much, millennials. That's what you better be focused on. So that's what I would be doing in our business.
So I'm on the same page with you as it for remote work versus being in the office. I just don't believe you can create culture. But what would you say? They'd say, yeah, you guys are, Buzz, you're living 30 years ago, 40 years ago, because like you just said, yeah, you can pretend like the phone doesn't exist, but it does. We can pretend that, remote work's not going to work, but there is the generation of working peoples and will continue to be. They're demanding it, so it's going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
So how, with your perspective that it doesn't work, are you going to stand in the way, and are you going to let the train run you over? Or are you just going to say, okay, if you're not willing to work from home, or excuse me, you're not willing to come in the office, you're just not going to work here? Or how are you, because that's kind of, I'm not going to say hypocritical, but some would say, well, it's happening, Buzz. So whether you like it or not, you can get run over by the train. Just like you said, the phone is happening, so you got to adapt. Well, remote work is happening. So you can either like it or you cannot. Or maybe you disagree with that premise.
I would probably get run over by the train. I'm being honest. I just would. And I know I take the stands of a lot of Jamie Dimon and
Mm-hmm.
Elon Musk, and get back to work. And probably what I would do, though, I would probably allow a hybrid is what I would probably do. So because I wouldn't want to get completely run over by the train, because I'm not. I understand that, but I without a hybrid, I would tell you, then this is not a place for you. We have a wonderful, I just not. But I'd be sensitive. I mean, if someone's got a child and there's care and whatnot, I would try to work around that. But generally speaking, I'm the wrong guy to ask, because it's bothered me since day one. Even in Paramount, when we were I didn't even own the business at the time. When COVID came along, we would have the people downstairs within the manufacturing. They can't work from home, right? So we cleansed, and we had masks. And me as a leader, every single day I'd go in that office. Now, some of my other managers wouldn't, because of COVID, and they stayed home and they worked from home. But I said to myself, and this is where leadership comes in, is how do I expect them to come into work and work downstairs close to each other, and I the leader of this company? Not going to happen. Not going to happen. And when I started to come in more, then all of a sudden the others started come in a little bit more. So I have a whole different perspective on that. I'm a big believer, a big reader and podcast of Simon Sinek. I don't know if you've listened to him before on Leaders Eat Last, and the book on why, and I've always been there, or going into a meeting and not speaking you're the last one that should speak into a meeting. But I just feel like when people saw what I was doing, then it talk about loyalty, talk about bleeding, what I call Paramount Blue. No. So I'm just probably I'd probably be hit by the train.
Well, but I think what's interesting, because I share that perspective, and a lot of people say, why do you share that perspective? You're like 36, what's wrong with you? But because I've seen culture, and I've run an organization, and I see how important that is. But what I love that you said is a little bit different perspective. People felt like they were missing out at that point. So no longer was it like whether he's making me, I got to be the office. I'm missing out on everything that they're doing. And I think that's a great perspective. I do believe that the shift is changing. You see a lot more people going to hybrid and people like Jamie Dimon saying, hey, you're coming to the office at least 2 days a week.
Elon Musk,
exactly. And so I think we're going to shift a little bit, but I don't think we'll go completely back based on how COVID has changed people.
That ship has sailed.
Yeah. Buzz, you've been very gracious with your time, and I just have a couple more questions for you. We briefly touched on work ethic. When I look into the future 10, 15, 20 years, I have a real grave concern for work ethic, and it kind of touches back to technology. And I see it in, quite frankly, I don't even want to say just in the generations below me, but as we talk about, this has permeated everybody. And I'm a big believer it's even changed us, our wavelengths and how we didn't grow up. So maybe we were through our developmental period, but their ability to take, just generally go from point A to point B and have the grit and the perseverance and the work ethic to know it's not going to happen in 1 year or 2 years. It might take 3, 4, and it's going to be really hard. It seems to me, and again, I could be wrong, so I want your perspective, to be dissipating and to just not be a fundamental basis of our society anymore because everything comes so quickly. What is your perspective on that?
Well, first of all, I believe that work ethics is part of your DNA, and I think it's part of what you're brought up in your family and what the expectations of your parents are about working hard and earning your salt, as my dad used to say. But there's so many easy ways today for these people to make money that's sitting at home. Influencers, right? I wrap my head. There's not a lot of work ethic that goes into that. They get on. So I just think it's a DNA and it's an upbringing that you have, and either you have it or you don't have it, and that's just the way it's going to be, and that's unfortunate. But hey, listen, if an influencer's making the kind of money they're making and they're doing what they're doing, they doesn't have to go out and really get their hands dirty, well, then I guess more power to them.
Yeah,
because we have to adapt to that.
Yeah, and that's absolutely true. And I think this whole influencer thing, I think it's kind of a fad personally. I had a guest a couple of weeks ago that said, though, but the positive side are people are starting to build, they want to buy from people now, not from brands or from companies. And so I think there's some advantages there. But, I used to kind of get depressed about nobody works anymore. Like nobody will show up. Nobody says what they're going to do. Like a man's word is not a man's word anymore. But I flipped, and this goes back to the mindset. Imagine if you're someone who does the amount of opportunity that's out there.
Yeah.
It's a million times easier in this day and age, I would say, to start and run a business if you have that type of opportunity and work ethic.
100%.
If not everybody does. Yeah. So I think that's a positive spin on it. Buzz, anything else that you would like to share with me and our listeners that we haven't already talked about?
Gosh, no, we've talked about so much. I've really enjoyed this. And like I said early on, I just hope there's a couple of nuggets in there that they can take. But it's been, as they say, life is a journey, not a destination. And I think if you're going to be on a journey of being an entrepreneur, it's a tough journey. It's one that a lot of people can't do. But if you really love what you do and you're passionate about what you do and you're passionate about your idea, go for it. I'm in the midst right now with my daughter. Matter of fact, she's been working for someone for a while, and I've been telling her for years, it's time now. It's time. Let me help you do this, and finally getting her to a point to where she's going to feel comfortable about doing it. But if you have the stomach and the gut for it, and the love for it, and the passion for it, it's a fantastic journey. There's nothing in the world to me to be entrepreneurial and have your own company and see a company grow with your people and have a vested interest and emotion into your business. And that's, I think, when people ask me what I miss most, it's the people and the emotion in the business. Because my kids will laugh when they hear this, but I gave every fiber of my body to that business, and most importantly to the people. So it's a great journey, a great reward in life if you can hack through that journey and get to it. But my feeling is that if you have it, take the risk and go for it.
Buzz, that's a fantastic conclusion. Thank you so much for your time.
Bet. Thank you, Andrew. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Wow. What a really fun conversation with Buzz. As you can tell, he's a very positive, optimistic individual. And I think the part of the conversation where we talk about mindset is so important, no matter where you are in life, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're in the corporate world, personal and professional, the power of the mind and what you set your mind to think and your outlook of the day. I think Buzz said it best. When you wake up every day, you have one of two ways to be. You can look at it as a positive, optimistic day, no matter what challenges lie ahead and opportunities, or you can have a negative outlook. And I think just as a human, we all have a choice to think positively or negatively. Again, not in a fake manner, still be authentic, but mindset's really important to so many things. And I'm a big believer in this is the day the Lord has made. Let us be glad and rejoice. Thank you so much for joining us this week for another episode of the Andrew Holland Podcast. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Andrew Holland Podcast, so you get the updates every week when we post the video version of the podcast. If you prefer to listen to them, go to your favorite audio platforms, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts or audiobooks, and you can find the Andrew Holland Podcast. Like the episodes, share it with your family, friends. We can only grow this as big as we collectively make it. And follow me on Twitter, Holland Podcast. One of the most enjoyable parts of doing the podcast is just interacting with you on Twitter, what you thought about the episode. If you want to be a guest or you have potential guests that you think I should reach out to, please let me know. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk again next Wednesday. Thank you for listening to the Andrew Holland Podcast. Be sure to visit our website, theandrewhollandpodcast.com, for additional content on business, entrepreneurship, and everything in between. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Andrew Holland Podcast, to get notifications when new podcasts have been released. And lastly, follow us on Twitter, Holland Podcast. That's Holland Podcast, for all the conversations we're having outside the podcast. Thanks again so much for joining us this week. Have a great day, and we'll talk again next week.